I'm really honored to be here. I'll actually step out and come closer to you guys. It feels a little bit lonely up there. Uh, thank you for coming. I'm really happy to see so many people. I hope this will be interesting, instructive. I would like to make this a very interactive session, so don't hesitate to interrupt me during the presentation. We'll also have Q&A at the end. One question is, can you guys hear me without the microphone in the back, or should I use? No. Okay, so then I'll use the microphone. So my job at LinkedIn is that of managing international and data products. And when I say international, essentially it's all the products that are outside of the United States, all the modifications we make to the LinkedIn site and the apps for members who are using the site outside of the US. For LinkedIn, the international markets are critical. At this point already 75% of our members are outside of the US, and the majority of our growth is coming from outside of the US. In the US we already had, we hit a saturation point at this point. But LinkedIn is an extremely mission-driven company, so I just wanted to take the opportunity to start from the mission, because actually that drives a lot of the product development practices at LinkedIn. And I wanted to share some of the learnings I had from working in product at LinkedIn. I'm an engineer by background. I then went to management consulting. And at some point, I decided to come back to my passion, which is building stuff and actually creating things that people will use at a massive scale. And I was fortunate enough to land at LinkedIn and be able to join the product team there. Mission is really important, and this goes all the way from the top, from the CEO, all the way down to every single member of the company, because it really drives what we do every day. All the business decisions are based on this idea of connecting the world professionals to make them more productive and successful. And you'll see a lot of the things that I will talk about actually go back to this. So I can give you a bunch of examples about why this is so important. Just as a quick stats about LinkedIn, as of the end of Q2, we had 380 million members globally. Again, more than 70%, 75% of these are outside of the US. In India, we have more than 32 million members at this point, and the site is growing pretty quickly still. So we have been, obviously very successful, and part of it is also reflected from the product perspective, in the bench of alumni from the product team at LinkedIn who actually joined companies, startups in the Silicon Valley area, but also in the broader internet space in other parts of the country and the world. I think that that speaks tons about the importance of product at LinkedIn. LinkedIn is truly a product-first company. That's why I'm so happy that I've been able to present here today, because this being the most important product conference really in this region of the world. The fact that our CEO has taken on the dual hat of chief product officer and CEO since last year speaks tons about how important he thinks the product side of the business is to the business itself. Okay, this is everything I'll say about LinkedIn. Happy to answer more questions about anything about LinkedIn after in the Q&A. Awesome. So the first kind of lesson that I learned joining LinkedIn, and this is working with the growth team, was that of the idea of big rivers. What are big rivers? Big rivers are places on the internet where there are a lot of people going by. It's like sitting on the side of a street, just like in front of this hotel. A lot of people going by. Even if you can put a sign there that says, "Hey, I'm here. Join my product." Even if very few people, if there is a small amount of people coming in, still because of the volume of traffic it goes through, that drives a ton of engagement and growth for your company. A great example of this is Pinterest. In the early days when Pinterest started, they were built on top of Facebook as a platform. And Facebook for a while allowed them to actually do very viral distribution. People basically signing up, binding the accounts with Facebook, and then publishing on their feeds and all their friends, "Hey, join me on Pinterest." At some point, Facebook chopped that growth avenue and stopped them from being able to grow that way. But at that point, Pinterest had already reached an escape velocity, and so they started continuing growing. So I think this is a super important piece, which is critical if you want to achieve scale. I will give an example about how LinkedIn leveraged this concept recently. So last year, we launched LinkedIn's China site. So LinkedIn had been present in China for many years. We are one of the very few social networks from the West that are not blocked in China. So we were present with an English version of the site. And then we decided to translate the site in Chinese. And at the beginning, because of the news and the news cycle, we saw a spike in registrations. But after a while, the registrations kind of tapered off. The growth kind of returned to the previous level. Obviously, this was not, we were not happy with this. And so we thought, well, where are big rivers in China we can tap into? And one of those big rivers is WhatsApp, which is China's WeChat. Sorry, it's WeChat, which is China's WhatsApp. And essentially, what we did is we worked together with WeChat to build a profile inside the WeChat app so that we can actually look up people using their LinkedIn profile from inside WeChat. Why? Well, because the WeChat profile is actually very, very limited. It's only a name and a picture, essentially. And so the LinkedIn profile had the opportunity to drive much more content and much more discovery possibilities for members of their platform. So they were happy about that. We were happy because they put us into the profile settings, so you can actually click and create a LinkedIn profile from inside the WeChat app. Guess what? There are more than 600 million people using WeChat actively, right? So this has driven a ton of growth for us in China. It's been extremely successful for us in that market. The other area that is really important if you think about growth is viral growth. And LinkedIn has been very successful in driving viral growth. How many of you guys get a lot of LinkedIn invitations? Yeah, so that's pretty much 100%. We are really good at that. One of the earliest users of the concept of address book import, so you can import your contacts from Gmail, from Yahoo, and then send connection requests to these people. If they're not yet on LinkedIn, we actually send them an invitation to join the network. So this has driven a lot of viral growth for us. But I wanted to talk about a different avenue that we discovered that drives also a lot of viral growth, which is public profile. So early in the day, LinkedIn profiles were not public. You actually had to come to LinkedIn and sign up to LinkedIn to see anything. And at some point, we thought, well, this is actually a lot of content, a big asset that we have that we could leverage for viral growth. We made a small piece of the profile public, and we let Google index it. And so that started to drive a loop in which the more people joined LinkedIn, the more profiles we had, the more likely we were to be the top result when people searched by somebody by name. And then suddenly, people started coming on to the public profile pages. And if they want to see the full profile, they actually still have to register, which drives even more content and even more Google SEO. So this is another way of driving viral growth, which is not like the spammy email, one-to-one transaction. But it has been a very significant driver of growth for LinkedIn over the last few years. Another example that I would like to share, and this is my second point, is that big rivers are important, but the flow that you make out of the big river, if you will, like the stream that you pull out of the big river, and the way you design it is probably as important. This is a page which is the people you may know page on LinkedIn. You might have seen it. In the old days, when you accepted somebody's invitation, you clicked on that email that says, connect with me, we would put you in the inbox. You would click on that, and you would land in the inbox, in your LinkedIn inbox, and you would see other invitations that you had received and messages and things like that. And then with one small line of code change, with a redirect, essentially, a few hours of engineering work, we made a toggle, and we changed that landing experience to land you on the people you may know page. And this, again, this design of the flow, it's not a user interface change. It's just the redirect. Yielded in tremendous growth for LinkedIn, because what happens is that more people connect, because there are many more options here to connect with people. And the other thing that we did here is we also started surfacing people who are not yet on the LinkedIn network. So Pega is a friend of mine. She's not on LinkedIn. You can actually invite her to join. And so this generates an invitation for a guest to come onto the site and then sign up to LinkedIn. So this very small change in the way we designed the flow had a tremendous impact on our growth and has been driving a ton of growth for us in the last couple of years.
How did you identify that these will be a river that you can tap on for
That's where the art comes in, right? The intuition. Definitely there is analytics behind it. I'll talk a little bit about that. So the question was, how did we identify this was actually a lever that we could drive growth with? And so it's a combination of analytics and the art, the intuition of the product manager who came up with this idea, Atif, my colleague. So this is an example of how flows are critical. But the UI is also very critical, and how you design this UI is very critical. So once you come to LinkedIn to sign up, there are a number of steps we bring you through. Probably most of you are already LinkedIn members, I would assume. So you probably haven't seen registration for a long time. You haven't created a second account. But I actually happen to use this flow very often because I keep on trying new versions of registration for international markets. So this is the first page you see after filling out your name and your email address. It's the next page where you put in your location and your position in your current company. And here what we did is we thought hard about the design of the UI of this page. We changed the registration flow a year ago to show this. All the common knowledge, common wisdom, the base wisdom says, let's try to reduce the number of clicks and steps that somebody has to make in order to get through the registration flow, because the fewer steps, the more you will have the funnel kind of perform, right? But we were seeing a huge drop-off rate on this page, actually. What would happen, people would sign up essentially with name and email address, and then coming to this page, for some reason, they would leave. And so we did a couple of experiments, again, this driven by analytics and by just the intuition. And we thought, well, maybe this page is too complicated. It has 5 fields, but maybe it's still too complicated, right? So we decided, let's actually split it up and see what happens. And so we split up the location part from the position part. Anybody wants to guess what happened after that? Any guesses? The conversions increased. And not only the conversion on this page increased, but the conversion on both pages together compared to the previous one. So what happens there, and this is our interpretation psychologically, is that it's easier to get through that first page because it's smaller, so people are less, they kind of feel like it's less work. But then once they start filling out that first page, then they get to the second page and say, oh, well, I might just continue and keep on filling this out. So counterintuitively, 2 pages have a better conversion than 1 page, which is not what you would normally say in a traditional way of thinking. And this leads me to the question about analytics is a great one. This leads me to the way we think about analytics. A/B testing for us is an extremely important piece of the puzzle, because without a very solid analytics framework at LinkedIn, we wouldn't be able to test all of these product ideas. This page is supposed to represent both the fact of splitting up people in 2 buckets and trying a test with 2 variants, but also the fact that the results can sometimes be very confusing, because A/B testing will tell you what's happening, but it will not really tell you why it's happening. And over that, it will tell you just help you understand optimizations at a local level. But oftentimes, if you focus too much on A/B testing, you end up not figuring out what's happening, what could be bigger, what is the bigger maximum you could achieve. You only get to the local maximum of your A/B test. But regardless, it's an important tool. We currently have at least 300 or 400 tests at any moment in time on LinkedIn. So without knowing, most of us are in probably a dozen buckets or so of testing. And we track hundreds of metrics for every test to see what performs better, how can you improve that. Let me just show you, one point which is really important about A/B testing, which is tracking the right metric. And I will take an example from Twitter. I had the fortune of meeting Josh Ellman, who's a LinkedIn alum, and he's now at Twitter, used to be at Twitter, and he moved on since then. But he actually came up with this concept of the 30 connections, the 30 follows on Twitter. So the idea being that in order to gain value out of the Twitter platform, you have to at least follow 30 entities, pages or people, because that's kind of the minimum threshold when you start receiving useful information. But this is where it gets really tricky. Are you following the 30 people because you find Twitter interesting, or do you find Twitter interesting because you're following the 30 people? What's the causation, and what's the, what direction does it go? Not clear at all. And even on LinkedIn, we have done tons of analysis trying to understand, does connectivity drive engagement or the other way around? There is a very strong correlation, without doubt. Unclear exactly, what the direction of the causality is. So this is something that, you can say, you can state and put to bed and say, okay, let's just drive it because we believe there's something good there, right? And again, this is where the art comes in. Not always you can actually measure all of this. Just as an example of picking the right metric, just like we did for Twitter, it's not enough to sign up. You also have to follow entities. On LinkedIn, another thing we did is let's actually abandon signups, raw signups, as the one metric that we track the most closely, and think about quality signups. Quality signups meaning, are they actually engaged after they come back? And so we came up with a definition of quality signups, which is a combination of things. Do you have a good profile? Because we actually show that if you have a good profile, it's more likely for people to find you. And so recruiters reach out to you, and so people find more value out of the network. And are you reachable? Can you receive emails? Do you have the mobile app installed? Can you actually receive inbounds from LinkedIn? One way to increase the number of quality signups is, again, counterintuitive, adding one more step in registration. Again, the fear is we'll drop off people, the funnel will convert worse. But adding this page actually helps a lot. This is a page that we put before the address book import. So before we have a chance of driving the viral growth, we put this page, which we call Welcome Mat, which basically asks you very simply, what do you want to do on LinkedIn? And we found that actually this page has two really good benefits. The first one is we get a chance of telling people what they could do on LinkedIn, because many people come onto LinkedIn and they don't know what can they do. And the second one is we actually get a good signal of how to tailor the experience later on, how to actually get them involved into the platform. And so even though this page adds a little bit of conversion decrease into the flow, you probably lose a few % of members. I don't know the exact number, but there is some loss. If you focus on quality signups rather than just raw signups, it actually has a net positive, because the members who do manage to get through this page, which are still the majority, then are way more engaged and are more likely to connect and come back to the site and and ultimately drive growth in a later moment in time. So if I were to stop here, the chat today with you guys, you would probably think that we are completely focused on metrics and numbers and the quantitative side of understanding flows and small details in the UI. Yes?
Just in that registration flow,
yep.
I've recently looked at this flow, and there's one more slide where it asks about your importing your contacts.
Yes.
Right? Now, there has been a debate on, bluffing the user. He is not really clear as to what will happen, and the imports will get imported, and, people will be sent out invitations and all. How do you take a call there, keeping a fine balance as to not piss off the user, and still, because that is essential to grow.
Yeah.
So how do you take the call there?
So it goes back to this is a great question. So the question was debate about address book import and the potential spamminess. So that's essentially basically tricking the user into sending invitations to everybody. So this is something that we have looked really hard, and we are very sensitive. It goes all the way back to the mission statement. That's why I put that slide at the beginning, which is connecting the members to make them more productive and successful. At the same time, we really want to be members first. Our first value at LinkedIn is member first, and we don't want them to have a bad experience. Every company has different life cycle stages. When you're small, you want to grow, then maybe you're more aggressive. At this point, what we did with our registration flow, we're actually very clear on what happens on that page, saying you import your contacts. The first thing that happens really is only the import of the contacts. When it comes to actually inviting people, we added a number of treatments there. One is we actually tell the user how many invitations will go out. And so the user has a very clear opportunity to actually double check that. And we also give them an opportunity to retreat those, kind of to pull back those invitations if they make a mistake. Does this hurt growth? Yes, it has decreased growth. But it is a trade-off that we are willing to take for the sake of our mission and our values. So I was talking about the quantitative side, but I would like to talk about, and this is what I call the yin, right? The quantitative, like the cold, hard numbers, right? But there is much more to product development than just the numbers. So I wanted to spend the second half of this chat on what I call the yang, which is the qualitative, the art in product development. And I wanted to start from China because I think this has been a very, it's really a transformational experience for the company at LinkedIn. And one thing that we realized early on in China is how important it is to actually fit well into the way people work in different markets. And the first thing that you have to deal with is the ecosystem. LinkedIn, like any other website, does not live in isolation. It lives within an ecosystem of other internet websites. In the West, those websites are Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, Outlook. All of these products are actually tightly integrated with LinkedIn. When we landed in China, we had all these integrations, but guess what? Almost none of these sites actually work in China. And so we had to rebuild all the plumbing with the local players there. Baidu is one, but obviously there is Tencent and Alibaba and so forth. So we actually spent a lot of time last year rebuilding a lot of this plumbing, making sure that if you search for somebody in China, you'll likely be using either 360 or Baidu as a search engine. And so the search indexes, just like we'd optimize them for Google, you better also optimize them for those other sites. And this is an investment that you need to do before the fact. You cannot just reason based on ROI because the traffic coming from China at that point was still small. But it's definitely something that you have to invest in. And so we did, and now we are getting definitely the traction that we are looking for in that country. The other piece around the ecosystem is that in reality, there are completely different use cases in some of these markets. Mobile turns out to be way more important for professional users in China than it is in the US, and I would imagine here in India as well. And so that's the reason why we did the agreement with Tencent to do the WeChat integration. And if you look at how people use products in different markets, the same activity, commuting to work, can take so many different forms, so many different ways that people actually use technology during these commutes. This is our bus in Silicon Valley, right? Everybody working on the laptop through Wi-Fi, so they're doing email essentially. But if you look up there, you have a subway where people are actually doing everything on the mobile. So the use case is completely different. And I wanted to give you an example of some of the intuitions we came about when thinking about some of these use cases. So when we launched the WeChat product, as I said earlier, we got a ton of registrations because there is so much traffic going through WeChat, and even a small diversion from that river yields a lot of signups. But then we noticed people were not really engaging with the profile because once you have a profile, it's not that engaging. And so we thought, well, how can we actually make this product more in tune with how the market thinks? And so we started creating gamification features on the WeChat profile. This is very different. So for a company like LinkedIn, which is a very professional brand, which is very, I would say, mature and stable, doing the gamification type of things and bringing it up to the point in which we have cartoonish characters is something that the company had never done before. So actually getting to that point has taken a lot of thinking into the product. But essentially, we started adding features like, for example, the number of views that you get on your profile. So people would play on how many views can I get. And some features around basically planning your career and thinking about what can they become in the future. So some social games that you can use to actually spend time. So this plays very well to the use case of a Chinese member who maybe spends in the morning a lot of time on the subway and just trying to find something interesting to do. As well as enabling discovery mechanisms. People don't know what LinkedIn is for, and so giving the opportunity to actually showcase one of the most valuable value propositions of LinkedIn is just search on the WeChat page. The other thing that I think is super important for products, and I'll take an example which is a few years old, is simplicity. Really executing on one value proposition insanely well. Back in the day, when some of us, the older of us, were still using Alta Vista, we then discovered Google and never went back. And the reason is because Google was so simple and so fast, and the results were so good that there was no reason why we should be using a different product. And I think to the credit of Google, they have managed to keep the simplicity till today. For me, it's an amazing exercise in discipline, and I think it's a fantastic testament to the vision that the founders had of the company to keep this extremely simple. In all honesty, I think that LinkedIn has a lot to learn from this. Our core product is pretty complicated, so I think that this is a great example of just delivering on one singular value proposition really well. And people really appreciate this because it eliminates all kinds of confusion or diversions. It only focuses the user on one thing. And I will give you an example of something that we have done to drive that type of value for our members. So this is a jobs listing page on LinkedIn. This is the job listing page that you see when you are not logged into the site. So this is for guest members who are not LinkedIn members. And they come onto this. And in the past, we were using this page just like the profile to drive growth, right? The example I gave earlier. And so in order to apply for the job, even if the job was actually on a third-party site, you'd actually have to go then to a recruiter site to actually apply for the job. You first had to create a profile, land on the job page, and then from there go to the third-party site to actually apply for the job. At some point, we thought, is this really driving the user experience and the value that we really want to give to our members, right? Forget the numbers, right? This was driving some growth. But is this really what we want our members to experience? And so we took a decision, which at the time seemed pretty counterintuitive, of saying, you know what? We will not ask people to sign up on this page. If the job is on a third-party site, we'll just send them there directly. And hopefully they will remember LinkedIn and come back later and then sign up. It did hit a little bit growth, but obviously the users are much more happy because now they don't have to go through all these hoops of registration to get to a third-party site where they wouldn't have even be able to use the LinkedIn profile to sign up. It took actually a reorg of the company to make this happen because what happened is we moved this page from the growth team to the jobs team. And the jobs team has as a metric, as a goal, that of driving job applications and the users to get jobs. The growth team had a growth target. And so when we made that move, it became completely obvious, right? Let's actually forget about growth on this page. So I think this is an important learning also is if you have teams, multiple teams in your company that are driving different parts of your business, think hard at the architecture of how you set up these teams. What are the targets you give them? What are the OKRs they need to hit? Because that will actually influence what your users will experience in the product, on the product side, in the experience day-to-day. So the other example I want to give of what's art in product is anticipating the user's needs. And I think one of the good examples here, again, is from Google. This is Google Now. This is from this morning. I woke up here in Bangalore after coming in late last night, and I got a ton of useful things that I actually needed for the morning, right? Whether what the exchange rate is, what are local attractions. I think that products that actually deliver on this delight of anticipating what I might need are really what makes people remember certain products. And they may get it wrong sometimes, but still, when they get it right, it's actually a great experience. This is something that I keep on coming back. I keep on flipping back to Google Now because I really feel that this is something that adds value to my life and my user experience with the Google products. And to me, the next level is, can you actually create a emotional connection with the product. Google Now is great because it actually makes me feel good. I actually have some good insight out of that product. But to me, getting to the next level is, do I really feel that I'm so passionate about this product, I'm actually going all the way out and making myself a viral growth distribution mechanism for that product, right? And in this case, I just want to talk about an electric car. We recently got this car, which is a Nissan Leaf, which is now very popular in the US. Electric car, it's basically a town car to go around and go to the supermarket, and it doesn't do long trips, very short range. But the emotional connection that we actually created with the car with my wife is something that's maybe silly to hear, right? I mean, it's very simple. It is a car which is quiet. Obviously, it's environmentally better off than a petrol car. It has a good behavior on the roads, and essentially it's created something that I feel strongly about. It changes the way I think about automobile and transportation. It's not a Tesla, it's not a high-performance car, but it still feels like you're driving something that is from the future, right? And that's, I think, something that very few products can do in terms of creating that emotional connection. We all know about the Apple products, right? But I think that there is something to achieving that level of sophistication with your product, which is amazing. And ultimately, really what matters for anything that we do as product designers, as engineers, as product managers, is really changing lives for the better. I think really that's what this talk is all about. It's like, how can we use all the knowledge that we have about computer science, but also all the knowledge we have about analytics, business metrics, and the art part of the product to drive better, to help people live better lives. And I found this picture, which is in the Flipkart lobby here in Bangalore, really, really inspiring, because they have as a vision, fulfilling aspirations for a better life. I find that that's the right level of vision. If you think about something, you should set your targets that high and really try to achieve that dream. You might not get there, but it is a vision. It's your true north. And if you can build towards that goal, you can already achieve tons with your products and your apps. So I'll stop here.